The young plumber, he's my age, a little older actually. His father was a plumber, and he hired Lee Marvin's dad to work in Woodstock as a plumber. And Lee Marvin, of course, was in the Marines.
Yeah, and I remember when he was still alive, he made a couple trips to the VA hospital up there in Albany.
Yeah, they said he was a hell of a guy.
Yeah.
A hell of a drinker, too.
Yeah, no. He died too young. I mean, he was...
He did. He lived it. But you know, the people that knew him in town said that he could be a great guy, too. He was a lot of fun, so...
Yeah.
Okay. What I will do, we'll do an introduction, ask you a couple basic questions, and then it's basically you telling your story.
Okay.
At the end, we have photographs you sent us, and then I'll have you hold up in front of you.
Oh, okay.
We can talk about them and
Sure.
where they were taken, when, etc. And then if you have some things you want to show. I was just, quite a coincidence, today is your anniversary, huh? You went in 7/14/66.
Well, I'll be damned.
I was looking, you know, when I wrote this up, the notes I keep, I said, holy crap, this is...
That is remarkable.
Yeah.
Because I always, the anniversary I always think of as far as my military career was September 21st when I was wounded. Mm-hmm. That sticks out in my head. I don't think about the other things.
Yeah.
That's really remarkable.
Yeah, I just noticed that when I filled this out.
You want to turn this light on? We did this.
No, that...
wait a minute, let me see.
Does that make a difference?
That's okay. I'm just...
I use this myself, so that's why I was wondering.
Yeah, I'm just getting a little too much...
Oh, okay. You want me to turn it on? Turn
No, leave it there. Let's see
there.
how it looks. Actually, this looks pretty good. So.
See that? I know my lighting.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I had forgotten. It's been quite a while.
Yes.
Give me a second here. Okay, we're rolling.
This is an interview at the Super 8 Motel, Kingston, New York, 7/14/04, approximately 3:30 p.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russage. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My name is Robert Earl Bliss. I was born in Los Angeles, California, May 8th, 1947.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I finished high school. I graduated from high school, and I went into the service right out of high school. In fact, I actually signed up for the service for the Marines before I graduated.
Okay, so you enlisted.
Yes.
Why did you select the Marine Corps?
I don't know. I guess that when I was in high school, I played a lot of sports. I was a gymnast, and I played football for 4 years. And I don't know. It's just that I knew I was going to the service. The Marines seemed like the logical thing to do. I figured if I could get through the Marine Corps, I had proven something to myself and maybe my family and friends. And I'm glad I did it.
Okay. Where did you go for your basic training?
I went through Parris Island.
All right. Could you tell us about your training, then tell us about your time in the Marines?
Let's see. I went through Parris Island. I got down there in July. After high school, I went out and visited my mother for a while, and then came back and went down to Fort Hamilton. We were sworn in down there, and they took us down to Parris Island. What was kind of stupid, I think, is that I had volunteered to go in the summer, not knowing how hot it would be down there in Parris Island, and it was brutal. Nonetheless, the training was only 8 weeks. I think that's probably because the Vietnam War was going on, and I think they needed personnel overseas, because today I think it's about 14 weeks, 13 or 14 weeks. So it was kind of a crash course, I guess, but it still didn't make it any easier, that's for sure. It was pretty tough. I found it for myself. I was very physical, and the physical training was, although very, very hard, was not the thing that bothered me. It was more of the psychological aspect of it, where they tear you down and build you back up. In those days, they didn't mind pushing you around. Today, they don't do that, as I understand. Not that you don't get as good of, if not better, training than we did. I see that what these guys are overseas now, they seem to be very well trained. But, so it was 8 weeks. After I had gotten used to the initial shock, which was very hard, these guys throwing garbage cans down the squad bay early in the morning and things, I seemed to excel at the physical aspect of it, and I managed to come out of Parris Island. I made PFC, graduated private first class, which was 10% of a platoon of about, I think we had over 200 guys in the platoon, so that was quite an honor. And one of the guys gets the dress blues, and that wasn't me, but that's okay. And from there, the night of our graduation, they had us all line up there and they gave us our orders. We knew, as they had told us earlier, that probably a lot of us would be going to Westpac. And Westpac was directly to Vietnam. I didn't have those orders for some strange reason. They sent me out to California to join the 27th Marines out there at Camp Pendleton. So I was there for a while, and I managed to get in to my captain's, well, let's see, I forget what company I was in. I think it was India Company. But they were looking for a company clerk, and I happened to raise my hand. I got in there, and I was doing the daily activities of whatever Captain Conger wanted, and I was sort of like his personal secretary. Well, I did that for a few months, and I got really pretty bored of it. I knew the action was over in Vietnam. So one day, we were out on the company street having our early morning muster, and the top sergeant said, "We need 10 bodies to go to Vietnam. Raise your hands." I found myself raising my hand. And it was funny because later on in the company office, the first sergeant said, "Bliss, if you get killed over there, do not come back and haunt me." And I'll never forget those words. So at any rate, we went through about 4 to 6 weeks of training, including some jungle training. And we took the airplane out of El Toro. They flew us out to, well, let's see, it was the hop to Hawaii, then through the Philippines, Okinawa, and then into Vietnam.
And whereabouts did you land in Vietnam?
We landed right in Da Nang, and got off that plane, and the first thing, of course, you realize is that blast furnace that hit you. My God, I've never since realized anything as hot as that. The humidity and the heat. They wanted us off. They put us in these cattle cars, they called them. The whole thing was pretty demoralizing. Right away, I said to myself, "What have I done here?" Concerning that I volunteered to go. And I remember looking down at my Timex watch, and as I got off the plane, my watch stopped. It just stopped, and I had had this watch all through high school, so that was a little disconcerting. But nonetheless, they took us off and had us digging sandbags most of the night. And finally, we just looked and said, "What the hell are we doing this for?" And nobody was around, so we went and got some sleep. We went through some battalion training, where it was really an orientation, I suppose, how to treat the people, what to do, what not to do, et cetera, et cetera. And then we got our orders. Well, the battalion training was actually after I had gotten to the battalion area, and then from the battalion area they sent me out to Hill 55 Dialock, the Arizona Territory. They used to call it Indian Territory. It was an area that was full of VC in 1967. It was villages, little villages with their little huts. We called them hooches, and there were a lot of rice paddies out there. And we ran patrols all the time and night ambushes. Most of those people that were wounded or killed over there were due to the VC mines and snipers, and that's what we experienced at that point. Then in the spring, we were ordered to move up southwest of Phubai and set up a battalion fire base, which became Camp Evans. As we were up in there, a sniper killed a young Marine, and they named the base after him, Evans, Camp Evans. We set this base up, and we ran patrols and battalion-size operations out of there for several months. I remember some of those operations were up in the Triple Canopy. When you go west of Camp Evans, you run into these hills, and then up into the jungle area up there, and those jungles were just, you couldn't see the sky. Most of them were Triple Canopy. Of course, the North Vietnamese were running their supplies down through those jungles, and supplying the VC and what have you. A couple times we found a couple of bunker complexes, and there were some firefights, and these NVA didn't stand, they left. And I remember one time I went into a bunker, and there were some plates and chopsticks and things like that, and I found a can that said "a gift from the United States." It was cooking oil, and with the shake hands, the red chicken hands, and the blue background. So you knew that the black market was doing very well in Saigon and other parts of Vietnam to get these American products to our enemy. It was pretty strange to me as a 19-year-old. I remember seeing that. So nonetheless, that went on for quite some time, and we took casualties. Again, mostly it was through snipers. Sometimes there was some fierce combat with either VC or VC and NVA, and as fast as it would begin, it would stop. We never found the enemy to stand and hold his ground and fight until we got up to the DMZ. And then you were facing North Vietnamese regulars, and it was a whole different ballgame. We were up on a mountain in late August. My company, golf company, has a radio relay station. In those days, we weren't supposed to, the United States or no one was supposed to know, including us, I suppose, that we had people in Laos and Cambodia. This was 1967 in August, and of course we did. And they had a big radio complex up there, Air Force and Army personnel, and they had us around the perimeter protecting those people. And it was Hill 681, I think. And it was so high up there, you could see Laos, you could see Cambodia, you could see the South China Sea, and it was extremely beautiful. You know, if it hadn't been a war, you would have loved to have been there as a tourist. Someday I'd still like to go back. But that was not the case. So we manned these positions, and it was in such a position that we were never bothered by any of the enemy soldiers. In fact, we had spotters up there, and we would have aircraft come in and drop ordnance on enemy who were down in these jungle areas and valleys. All of a sudden, we were ordered out of there in the first week of September, and it was they brought up the big Chinook helicopters with the double props, loaded us all up. In fact, we couldn't, while we were up there, everything was brought up to us. Water, food, anything we needed, because it was just too difficult any other way. We were ordered back to Camp Evans, and when we got there, we had a huge briefing by platoons and by companies, and they said, we're going to pack our gear. We've been ordered up to Con Tien, and this is the fall of 1967. What was going on at the time is that the NVA had more or less had that whole area up there, especially Con Tien, under siege. They were throwing in just an amazing amount of rockets and artillery and mortars in on these people. I had heard there were days when they took 1,200 to 1,400 rounds a day. Pretty incredible. So these guys were up there living like rats, these Marines, in these bunkers. And so we were supposed to go up there, and we were a roving battalion. What we did is we relieved elements of the 26th Regiment who had been mortared in place in several different, at least 2 different areas the week before we got up there, and they had really taken a lot of casualties. Well, as it was, anybody that went up there at that time took casualties. The 9th Marines were almost, Bravo Company and Alpha Company were overrun in the summer in July. There's a very interesting book about that called Operation Buffalo, where the NVA actually were able to overrun elements of the 9th Marines. And so we went up, and...
Okay, so have you second, as a roving battalion, then you moved into areas that were threatened? Is that
yeah, they wanted us to look for, to pin and engage any NVA units we could find outside of Con Tien, because they were afraid that Con Tien was probably going to be attacked en masse, and indeed they were at one time, but they were repulsed prior to our coming up there. So we would move every day, and as every day we moved, every morning we were shelled. They had their forward observers watching us, and as we filled in our holes, in the morning they'd shell us, and in the evening they'd shell us. So sometimes it was mortars, sometimes it was rockets, sometimes it was artillery, But it was every day we were shelled. It was miserable enough also because it was a lot of rain, a lot of monsoon was hitting us there at that time, and it was just miserable. By the time we'd been up there, I guess a week or two, I think most of us they were picking us off quite, with these artillery rounds and all this, and we were, a lot of us, I know for myself, I thought, well, hell, I'm not coming home from this, I thought. So we became quite fatalistic about it, and I'm sure other servicemen in other wars have done the same thing, especially those guys down there in World War II in the islands, whatever. But nonetheless, on the 21st of September, we were out on an operation, a search and destroy again. We were southeast of Contian, about 1,000 meters out, and we were told to, my company, I was a radio operator, by the way, and came over that we were to turn to the right, fix bayonets, and move in on line. So you take the whole company in one line and move up, just left to right, and move in. What had happened, we'd heard some firing going on up in front of us, and what had happened is Echo Company, who was in the lead element, had walked right up onto a bunker complex, and these NVA came out and started killing all these guys. And then it just broke out. So Echo was trying to disengage to pull back to set up a line of fire, and Foxtrot was ordered up to cover their rear, cover them while they disengaged, and then it just broke out, and we realized, well, I didn't realize, because we couldn't tell, there were hedgerows all around us, and these hedgerows were 8 or 10 feet high, but we were ordered, then after this we were ordered to move in, Gulf Company, up on line. So I found out later that we were a flanking element, and we were trying to catch the NVA on their backsides to give relief to Echo and Fox up on our left and front. So as it turned out, later on, we had run into the 90th NVA Regiment. I know because I'm doing this research for a book for an author, and of course the research I'd done in the past. And they were situated in bunker complexes that was very well fortified, and they knew what they were doing. They had all areas pinned with their mortars, and they pretty much worked us over. Every time I saw a fire team run up into the hedgerows and an explosion went off and they were blown back. The Marines up there, all of us were so excited. The adrenaline was rushing. The bullets were snapping over our heads like this, and we wanted to get at these NVA because we had taken enough. We had been shelled every day. We were up there, and we were pissed off. I can't put it any other way. We were really, really mad. But we couldn't really get to them. Again, I said as this because these hedgerows in the way. It got into a grenade duel. Grenades were throwing back and forth. There was so much going on, it was very hard to tell, except for the fact that people were getting wounded and people were getting killed, and they were lying around out there in front of me. I remember an NVA kept sticking his head up off in a corner. He must have had a ladder back there, and he was pinpointing mortar positions for his mortar crews. And every time he'd put his head up, we'd all shoot at this guy, but we didn't hit him. So he kept passing these orders back, I guess. And at some point, something landed right next to me here. I'm not sure if it was a grenade or a 60 millimeter mortar to this day, but it blew me up in the air. Blew my sergeant that way, Sergeant Nelson, or rather Sergeant Roberts, and I remember coming down with a bang. It knocked the wind out of me. Everything was sort of like yellow, and I could smell the cordite. I had this very strange taste in my mouth, and I don't know what that was. Maybe it was the cordite. But I tried to get up, and as I got up, I remember looking down and seeing my left foot, which was turned over this way in a position it shouldn't have been, and my femur was poking up into my left leg, and I realized I was in bad shape, and I fell back down like this, and Sergeant Roberts there said on my left, "Bliss, call him up and tell him we need help, we've been hit." So I tried to get the radio, but I couldn't, it was on my back, and I was in a bad way, so he crawled over and pulled the radio off, and they got people out there to pull us out. They pulled us back into a dry water, it's an old dry river bed, I guess, and they were putting the wounded up in there, and there were a lot of guys that were in really bad shape, and corpsmen were all in there trying to treat them and what have you. This went on for quite some time, and I remember at one point we had one jet came through and dropped some ordnance on these, shot some rockets actually down into these bunkers. And that was the only one that came in that day. Anyway, it kept the medevacs going because just about a month or so ago, I got an email from the helicopter pilot that got me out, and he told me that he and his wingman were running medevacs for 11 hours that day. So obviously we were there for some time. Time, in combat, time is irrelevant. It also does. You can't focus on time. It seemed very fast to me.
Was that a Marine?
Yeah, these were Marine helicopter pilots, okay. And they were running. They would take the guys, the wounded and dead, down to Da Nang. They'd fill up with water and ammunition and come back. And they did this for 11 hours. And some of these helicopters were shot down. He told me later. I was one of the last to get out, if not the last. And the helicopter, they finally got me on. I told this corpsman, I said, look, if I don't get out of here pretty soon, I said, I'm not going to make it. I knew it. I stayed conscious the whole time. I suppose I was in shock, but I don't remember. I guess I didn't lose that much blood, although I must have lost enough. Maybe the shell had cauterized the major vessels. I'm not sure, but I managed to live through it. The helicopter got down, and they got me on this helicopter with a couple of other guys, and it took off, and they were headed towards Dong Ha, which was they had a military base back there, which was maybe I think about 20 kilometers south of Cantian. But they were radioed as I got near it and said, "Don't come in. Where their artillery is hitting the base hospital." And he looked out, he told me, and said that they were impacting around the hospital. So he took off towards the USS Sanctuary, which was on call and on station out on the South China Sea because of this huge battle we were in. And they were taking wounded out there. I had been there, I guess 5 months ago when I had malaria. I was there once before for 30 days. But nonetheless, he told me that they limped out on fumes and barely landed that helicopter. They had to leave the helicopter there because they couldn't take off again on that ship. And I remember they took me out. The last thing I remember was a minister with purple cloth leaning down, giving me last rites on the deck. And I told him in no uncertain terms to get the hell away from me. Well, I used other words. I said I wasn't going anywhere. And the next thing I woke up, minus my foot, and this corpsman tried to come over and tell me very, very kindly and very nicely, as gently as he could, that I'd lost my foot. I said, yeah, I know, I lost my foot, but I was amazed that I was alive. So that didn't seem to bother me. But anyway, eventually gangrene set in, and it worked its way up, and there were subsequent operations and amputations. Until it got all the way up to my hip, and the doctor came in and said, well, Bliss, we got to make one more operation. He says, this is all we can do. He says, you're going to have to fight and live through it. I said, well, I'm sure I will. Well, I'm here today, so I guess I did. And that was the story of my trip to Vietnam.
Now, what kind of weapons did you carry?
Oh, that's something I wanted to mention, because the firefight, well, it was more than a firefight, the battle we were in up there on the DMZ that day, we had the M16 primarily, and it was I went through 3 rifles that day. It just kept jamming and jamming and jamming. Eventually they pulled it out later on, just prior to 1968, sometime back there, before Way. I think it was probably still in the fall of '67. They pulled the weapon because the ejector was not working right, and it was a real pain in the ass that I remember stories of Marines dying up there with their cleaning rods out in front of them. And it's a horrendous situation to be sent into that war and not have the proper tools to use. And then there were also guys that had their M79 grenade launchers, which was very effective, and we had the M60 machine guns, and we had our mortar crews and those type of things. And but the problem was, of course, we were up on the DMZ. We were under strength. We were undersupplied, and our weapons were not working right. And the NVA up in front of us, they were much more well supplied than we were. So it was quite a bad situation, all in all. This is what happens when you let politicians in Washington run a war that is 13,000 miles away instead of letting the men in the field take care of it. But that's another story, maybe for another time.
When were you discharged from the Marines?
Well, I was on that hospital ship for a month, and then I spent a year at the Oakland Naval Hospital, recuperating there and being fitted for an artificial leg. And I was officially discharged. I had wanted to stay in the Marines, but they medically discharged me, medically retired me. So I was discharged in June of '68. I was already back in New York when I got the separation papers.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel, in retrospect, that the training you received at Parris Island was adequate?
Oh, sure. Even the 8 weeks. And we'd had subsequent training after that, as I mentioned, before going overseas. And a lot of it was on-the-job training, too, once we got there. But we had really great NCOs in Vietnam, and they worked us into the unit in a proper manner that gave us the... well, I mean, you know, the first day I was there in Da Nang, that next morning they brought an ambush group came in, and one of the men had been shot through the head and was killed. So it's quite a rude awakening to combat, and it was very frightening. But I found, like everyone else, once you've been in a situation, it's amazing how the human being can adapt to any type of situation, and you do. So yeah, I thought we had the proper amount of training. I think the kids today down there are getting better training.
Have you been in contact with your fellow Marines that were over there with you?
Well, for all those years before, I guess most of us wanted to forget about the experience. We weren't welcomed home or anything. I personally spent 15 years drinking in bars. That's how I felt about it. I just wanted to crawl into a hole and drink myself to death, I guess. That's what happened to me for a while. So I wasn't really in contact with anybody. But I met a nice woman in 1980, and we got married, and things changed. And I had a son, and things got better, and they got better. And then we all got into the computer age, and I started locating some friends through these online websites. And today, of course, as it is, there's a whole bunch of us in contact. In fact, I'm the membership chairman of the 2nd Battalion 4th Marines Association at this time, and so I'm in contact with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. In fact, as I mentioned, I just got a letter from Colonel Hammond, who was my battalion commanding officer in the field there in Vietnam. A really good guy. He was wounded and received 3 Purple Hearts while he was there. It was very hands-on battalion.
How did you feel about the leadership at that level?
We had good leaders in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. I'm speaking for my battalion,
yeah, right.
But from other people that I've spoken to also, they said the same things. Some of our officers had been in World War II. Some of them had been in Korea, and they were field officers, and they knew what they were doing. They were aggressive, but yet at the same time they tried to get a lot of us home. Mm-hmm. And Colonel Hammond was one of those, and I mentioned that to him, and he's a good man. He was an officer that came out of the Naval Academy, and he's a very good man.
Were you aware of the anti-war movement?
Was I aware of it?
While you were there?
we had heard stories about it from guys that were coming in, and some of the newspapers that we might have had access to, not that many. We were out pretty much in the field all the time. But occasionally, if we got into a big area like Fubai, the Stars and Stripes would be around or something like that. We'd see some of these articles, and we just thought that they were misinformed. So, I mean, this is 1967, and we were still fighting the communists then. It wasn't anything to do with, well, as Irwin knows, after Way, things went downhill for the Americans, and should we have been in Vietnam? No, obviously, but of course hindsight is cheap.
Yes, right.
Yes, looking back historically, no, we should have never been there. Eisenhower had told Kennedy, don't make the mistake of going into Indochina. Well, look what happened to the French. And then we went in after them, and we should have never been there, no. But the fact that we were, a friend of mine told me years afterwards, he said, Bob, he said, nobody may thank us for our service, but he said, we did what we were trained to do, and we have nothing to be ashamed of. And, that made me think, and I said, that's right. We were serving our country like our fathers before us. My family's been in this country since 1638 and fought in every war since the French and Indian War, so we were doing what our fathers did before us, and that's the way it's always been. We've always been patriots and supported the country. Anyway, I'm sure they learned some big lessons about Vietnam, and it seemed to show later on, and it shows today with, in fact, my unit is over in Iraq at the moment, losing some of our American boys, and, I think the country has changed the aspect of those days. Of course, it's a different time, but you can see there's more support for the American forces that are overseas. What's the bumper sticker you see now? Get Bush out. No, save our troops. Get Bush out. So I don't know. Of course, politics and the military have always rubbed against each other in one way or another, and usually for the worst, I feel. But yes, to answer your question, I am in touch with a lot of these guys, and we have our reunions every summer, and these guys have all gotten back to, for the most part, gotten back to good lives. They're married, have good jobs, pay their taxes like everybody else, and that's all we ever wanted to do. And so I think history will look at us differently than they did back in the late 60s and 70s. At least I hope they do.
Did you join any veterans organizations when you came back?
Not right away, but eventually I joined the Disabled American Veterans, and I'm a member of the Vietnam Veterans of America and my battalion association, those three.
And you did talk about you are in contact. Could you sent us some photographs?
Yes.
If you could hold it just up under your chin, Wayne can focus on it and tell us, where and when.
Okay.
About each one of them.
Well, this is one of the pictures they take at Parris Island for their book, which I lost somewhere. But they put you in dress blues, even though it's 100 degrees down there in Beaufort, South Carolina. And everybody gets one of those. This is a picture of us in Vietnam. This is Camp Evans. We were back off some operation. By the looks of the wet clothes, looks like we had pretty much just gotten back off an operation.
Whereabouts are you in that picture?
I'm standing right here with a cigarette in my mouth. I was usually the tallest one there. I was 6'2", 6'3". This gentleman here, Gary Schaefer, was killed the day I was wounded. He was a grenadier. This gentleman died mysteriously when he came back from Vietnam. I heard later it was probably from heroin. This is my friend Mike Lovelace, who lives in California today, my best friend. He stepped on a bouncing Betty mine and jumped up in his face and didn't go off. Ever after that, he was known as Betty. This is my friend Oriano. I forget his first name now. He survived, and I saw him in the Naval Hospital when I came in the middle of the night. he heard me talking and he said, "Bliss, is that you?" When the lights were out in the squad bay in Oakland, the Naval Hospital, we got back together, and I don't know whatever happened to him. I haven't heard from him since. This is Sammy Summers. He lives in Detroit. He still has alcohol problems, and but he appears to be getting better. So says a friend of mine who's not in this picture.
Were there any drugs being used that you know of at the time you were there?
In 1967, there was a little bit of marijuana that sometimes you could get in the villages. Most of the Marines didn't do that. I remember smoking a little bit of marijuana when I was over there once or twice, and it was extremely strong. But apparently the communists were trying to get us to do those sort of things, and we found out about that. We realized, wait, we're really being stupid here, so we shied off that. Of course, I understand that later on it really became more prevalent, and even in the heroin too, and it was pretty disastrous.
What year was it, 67?
That was 1967, at Camp Evans. This is a picture of that mountain I mentioned, 681, overlooking Camp Evans on the South China Sea, the radio relay station. This was my little bunker, which is basically a rat's nest. I'm holding my M16 rifle here, and somebody was taking a picture. I think it was Smitty. And this is a Marine named Delgado. He did survive Vietnam. I should have said later on, I should have said quickly that we had subsequently after the battle that I was in, the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines was in the field for about 7 weeks. There were other battles. There was a bridge that had to be defended between Camlo and Comtian. It was told to be held at all cost. Well, the NVA came through my company, Gulf Company, that one night and overran the CP and killed a whole bunch of officers, the battalion surgeon, and a number of other people before they were repulsed in the morning. Anyway, there were other firefights out there with NVA. A helicopter was shot down. They liked to fight at night, and they'd come right at you. So this went on for about 7 weeks before 2-4 was pulled off the line and sent to Dong Ha to refit. We went in there with 960 something men, and when they were pulled off the line, there were 324 men. So we served our country. Let's put it that way.
And what hill number was this, did you say?
That was a hill 681. I don't know if you can see this. This is an operation that was up in the mountains. I don't remember exactly when. It was probably the summer of '67. I know a couple of these people. One of them was a sergeant who was a drill instructor in Parris Island, this guy in the middle. And as you can see, the area looks like a moonscape. That's because it was bombed prior to our going in there. On the outside to this is triple canopy jungle. And I don't recall what we found there, if we found anything. Sometimes you go on these operations and you wouldn't find anything and they'd send you right back again. Sometimes you'd find bunker complexes and what have you. This is a picture of me on 681. Smitty was taking a picture. As you can see, this mountain was heavily bombed. And then they put a radio, what they do is bomb these areas and make them look like that, so that, of course, you'd have fields of fire and you'd be able to see what was going on and the enemy couldn't sneak up on you. So we were situated around the top of this mountain, and while the radios groups were up on the top there. This is part of the logo of the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. On the bottom it says "Second to None" and "The Magnificent Bastards." Now somebody gave us that handle, and I'm not sure who. It was a general. I think in World War II it might have been a corregidor. But there's a whole history of that, and our battalion goes back to the Boxer Rebellion. They were known as the China Marines, and there's a whole history about every Marine regiment, and anybody was in it. If you're worth your salt, you know it, and you know the history. Again, this was up on the same mountain. I thought it would be kind of cute to have some of my friends pose on this tree branch here, this stump that was sticking out of the ground, and we'd send it home to our loved ones, and they could see how happy we were in Vietnam. And we're all smiling, and we were happy up there on that hill. It was almost like in-country R&R. Nobody bothered us, we didn't bother anybody, and it was very nice. you could actually see rain coming 20 minutes before it got to us. It was always 20 minutes for some reason, I don't know why. Now this is Camp Evans, and this is the, let's see, that says, the harder we work, the luckier we get. Well, that wasn't often the case. However, this is the battalion CP area. You can see a huge whip antenna in the background looks like it's coming out of Gene Smith's head. He was a very good friend of mine. I did see him in California and then lost contact. He lived in Whittier. I don't know whatever happened to him. I've always wanted to get in touch with him again. And this is my good friend Mike Lovelace. Believe it or not, he had malaria. I saw he had malaria, and I got a corpsman up there on the DMZ to get him out. When he got back to Dong Ha, everyone was gone. And he said to Sergeant Nelson, who somehow survived and won two silver stars up there without getting a scratch, a big guy, he was over 6'5" too, big black guy who became a postman. Nobody could find him after that down there in Carolina somewhere, and we never did find him. But nonetheless, Lovelace said to him, "Where is everybody?" And he says, "They're all gone." And he said, "What about Bliss?" He says, "Well, I don't know. I think he was killed." Well, we did get in touch years later, and lo and behold, I wasn't killed. Anyway, he had malaria, and he was very lucky to get out of there. Oh, well, the story I want to say quickly about him, when he got back to the United States, he got tapped for duty as the president's, what do they call it? Well, put it this way, when the president gets off his airplane, Air Force One, or gets off his helicopter, there's a Marine always standing out there by the door. Well, Mike Lovelace had gotten that duty, and
Honor guard
duty, yeah, is that what it's called? And he was very happy to have that, except there was a lot of spit and polish, of course. That's why a lot of guys, I think, volunteered to go overseas, because they didn't have to do spit and polish. Junk on the bunk and things on the springs, we all remember that, right? Anyway, this is me in Quang Tri. Here's Mike Lovelace over here. This other man over here is Chandler. I never found out what happened to him. He was with Force Recon at one point. But this is Quang Tri City. The Yarvins up here had gotten attacked by an NVA outfit, and we went up to relieve them. And when we got up there, the NVA disappeared again. We didn't think too much of the Yarvin over there, by the way. Although I heard the 1st Army Division was probably pretty good. This last picture I have here, well, I have a couple of others here too, but this is a picture, maybe I should show these first. You've seen that one. This I got from Lovelace. He sent this, one of his photographs. This is up in Quang Tri at the same time. And we were wearing our little boonie hats, so-called. We're standing here. This is May. This is a man named Hamilton. He was killed on the bridge with a machine gun defending the perimeter, and he was killed. And there's Mike Lovelace. This last picture is pretty amazing. When I was on the hospital ship for that month, I wasn't supposed to live anyway. My parents kept getting telegrams from the Naval Department saying that condition critical, prognosis guarded, so they didn't think I was going to live. Anyway, maybe that had to do with the fact that they didn't give me a Purple Heart. Well, when Headquarters Marine Corps Hawaii heard about this, where General, now what was his name? Well, now that skips me. But the general in Hawaii was head of all Marine Corps Forces Westpac. And this just general decided that he was going to come out and personally award me my Purple Heart. Behind me you can see these litters. We were on a big C-130 and you're strapped in. We just come in from the Philippines. Now this corporal came aboard and he said, "Do you think you can stand up, Lance Corporal Bliss? General so-and-so personally wants to award you. This is a very big honor. He's so-and-so." I said, "Well, I haven't stood up yet, but for the general I'll make an effort." And as you can see, I did. Well, I was about 135 pounds here. When I was in Vietnam, I was about 180. So I'd lost a lot of weight, as you can tell, with that amputations. But he came up and he pinned it on me, and he was a very nice man, and he was like a little grandfather. I'll never forget that. Much shorter than me and very nice. And I had another picture of him pinning the award on me, and I've lost it, and I don't know what happened to it, but at least this survives. can't remember his name. What was it now? Oh well. And I guess that's, there's a few here and there I guess I have, but that's basically it. And I think if I had to do it again, I might do it in the Coast Guard. That's what I told my son. I said, Jeffrey, if you're going to go into the military, go into the Coast Guard. Although if he had gone into the Marines, I would have been very proud of him too. In fact, I have a nephew in San Diego right now who's in the Marines, and he'd hurt his foot, and his unit had already left for Iraq, and he was very, very upset that he didn't leave with them. But that's just the way the Marines are, and I suppose other branches of the service are the same. You want to stay with your buddies, and I think probably that's what it's all about. You asked before if the protesters bothered us. We were pretty much, I remember my squad, my platoon, we were all for each other, and we didn't care what else was going on anywhere else. We were there, and that's all that mattered. We were in Vietnam, and we were going to be there for a year. So we relied on each other, and we fought together, we died together, and as we all know, some of the strongest relationships you'll ever have are with the guys you fought with in combat, and I'm proud to have served with some of these fine young guys over there in Vietnam, and we will remain friends for as long as we live, the ones that we contact.
All right, well,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Well, thank you.